pod bay doors, please, Hal.
Brian, what are you doing here?
I should ask you the same question. Lois, you're in an auto parts store stealing mufflers. This is worse than that Winona Ryder thing.
Are you saying I'm a klepto?
Actually, I was talking about the age of innocence. It is settled, May. Our parents have consented, and you and I are to be married on the first warm, sunny day of spring.
That would be most good, Newland. Most good.
I'm sorry, but she is just awful. Is there any way, can we add like a topless scene or something?
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
We can? Oh, great. All right, we got a movie.
The pod bay doors are open. Welcome once again. I'm your host, Jerry Dean Roberts of ArmchairCinema.com. And seated across the country from me is the pillar of social graces of 19th century, the critic from TalkMovieToMe.com, Mr. Doug Heller. How the heck are you today, sir?
Unprepared.
You would not make...
I had a quote, and now I lost it.
You would not make it in 19th century society.
No. No.
I think I moved too fast on him.
Yeah. She never asked. She never asked me.
Welcome.
There are much better, and I had some really good ones. But...
Okay, welcome to the beginning of Black History Month, where we're starting by talking about a bunch of white people problems.
Single... This is called The Age of Innocence, Martin Scorsese's The Age of Innocence, or White People, the Motion Picture.
Right. There's not a black face anywhere in this movie.
No.
It's all white people.
Given the time, it's the 1870s and it's New York society, that's really not all that surprising.
Right. This was my choice, by the way.
Yeah.
This was going to be Once Upon a Time When We Were Colored, but apparently the movie is out of print, and really
I found it nowhere.
I didn't find it anywhere. We looked and looked and looked. We didn't find it. So, white people. I wore a white T-shirt just for this occasion. I'm going to tell you. This is a movie that I fell in love with at the time. This came out in 1993.
Mm-hmm.
But it didn't grab me up the way it does now. I'm not sure why, but it took watching this about 5 or 6 times for me to really kind of dig into it.
I can see that.
It also came out in the fall of 1993, which is my busy season. Because I'm watching, 5 films, I'm watching 20 films a week, And I was trying to get to this one. I got to this one at a sneak preview before its major release, because by the time it got to its major release, there were going to be like 9 or 10 other films that I wanted to see. So I was really surprised when because the Academy Awards gave this 4 nominations. And I was actually really shocked that it didn't get more. This did not get a Best Picture nomination.
Nope. No Best Picture, no Best Director. Best Adapted Screenplay, I think, right?
Yes. And the only performance was Winona Ryder.
Yeah.
Was expected to win.
Even Danny didn't get one.
No. She was expected to win.
I didn't know that.
And it turned out to be Anna Paquin in the piano. I'm not complaining. Both are very good. No,
certainly not. Yeah.
Both are very good. But if a person goes into Scorsese films with a set of expectations, this is not what they're looking for.
No.
Although Scorsese calls this the most violent film he ever made.
I see that. I remember him saying that. I read that somewhere. I can kind of agree with him, because it's emotional violence.
Yeah.
I saw this when I was on a big Scorsese kick back in the early 2000s.
We all did.
I was making my way through his lesser known, I guess, or at the time, movies. And
Kind
I
of
saw
forgotten.
this- yeah, and I saw it, and I'm like, well, that's good. And then I went on with my day, you know. And I came back to it after Roger Ebert put it in his great movies column. And I read that, and I went back and rewatched it, and really kind of fell for it, and have since I've bought this movie at least twice, once on DVD and once on the Criterion Blu-ray.
I have a poster to this day. I have a poster of this movie on my wall.
It's a great mob movie.
It is. It's about a family.
Based on the Pulitzer Prize winning novel by Edith Wharton, which is a very good book.
Which I listened to on the audiobook. I had trouble reading the book, but I listened to the audiobook, and it's one of those books where you feel like as you're reading it, the person who's reading it to you or telling you the story is sitting next to you,
Right.
and you're watching all of the things happen. You're kind of they're telling you who these people are and what they're about and all of this kind of stuff. And as you get into it, it gets more and more, it gets deeper and deeper and more intimate. Because it starts with the whole spectrum of New York City society.
Yes.
This is the society that Edith Wharton grew up in. And the book was written in 1920. The book is 100 years old this year. It was published in 1920, and she's looking back to her youth,
Right.
to the things she remembered, the society that she remembers, which is amazing because the texture of Scorsese's film, in the set direction, in the filmmaking, in the editing, in the way the camera moves, is all indicative of how these people are living in this society.
Yeah.
And it's a terrain that he knows, but maybe not a social structure that he knows.
Right. It's still it's New York
In the 1870s.
in the 1870s. It is Bill the Butcher lived, crawled uptown, and became a lawyer.
Yeah.
Because this takes place 5 or so years after Gangs of New York.
Right. In the upper proper society, the society of New York at the time, and what's so fascinating about it is that the violence is not aimed at hurting you physically. It's aimed at hurting you emotionally, financially, and in every other way, because
destroying your life.
Destroying your life. Maybe not killing you, but destroying your life in a way that
making it so you would like to be.
Making it so you wish you were dead. The thing about this is that everything is structured so that you have no options other than what is available to you through the social order. It is determined where you live, how you behave in polite society is directly determines where you live, where you work,
who you can socialize with.
And there's a code of conduct that is so rigid and so hard and so pressed down on these people that when they move, it's like they've got a rod up their back and they have to move across a room this way or this way, and you can't.
The broom handle is very far implanted.
Right. And I remember Winona Ryder said at the time that this movie came out, she said, "This is a time when a hand gesture could mean I want to screw your brains out."
Mm-hmm.
You know, the slightest hand gesture. And it was just a terrible way to live. But they did it.
Mm-hmm.
Because otherwise, you're going to be working otherwise you're going to be moving to a poor part of town, working in a smelly factory because your family name has mud on it.
Mm-hmm.
That is the way this is. The key line of dialogue to all of this, the key line of dialogue is said by Michelle Pfeiffer, who says, "It seems silly to me for Christopher Columbus to have discovered America only to turn it into a copy of another country."
Only
That
to
is-
turn it into a copy of the old world. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
That is exactly what they have done.
Yeah.
That is exactly what they've done. And that comes from the narration,
Mm-hmm.
where she talks about all of these things. She talks about the dinner plates. She talks about the service. She talks
Mm-hmm.
about the sterling silver platters and things like that come from England, that come from India, that come from
Mhm.
Egypt, that come from all of these different places. It's Xanadu.
Yeah.
Everything from around the world is collected into this one place, and it means nothing.
Right. And I actually considered this Martin Scorsese's Magnificent Ambersons.
It is. It is.
Because it's very similar, and I got the impression that he worked to recreate Wells's ballroom scene.
Yeah.
In that ballroom scene that he has, it's a long fluid shot. Sorry for bumping the desk. Weaving in and out from character to character, getting the information. That's exactly how, and it's like 20 minutes long. That's exactly what Wells did for the beginning of Magnificent Ambersons that got whittled down and cut up. So I liked that. I liked that he was paying tribute to the Magnificent Ambersons at a time when most people could not have found a copy of the Magnificent Ambersons. So,
I couldn't.
Not in the early 90s, no.
He's also in this film, and he does this in other films too, but I think you would agree that he does it the best here. He's the master of motivated and unmotivated camera movement.
Mm-hmm.
Motivated being we're following two characters
Mm-hmm.
from point A to point B. The camera follows them. Unmotivated means that you are following a character who is walking through a room, and the camera moves independently of that person.
Mm-hmm.
The character walks this way, the camera goes around the other side and meets them at the door.
Right, the garage sequence in Taxi Driver.
Right. When he's on the phone and he's apologizing to Sybil Shepherd and the camera moves away, so you don't have to look at that.
Right.
Reservoir Dogs.
That was more violent than
Tarantino does that in Reservoir Dogs when they're torturing that cop and the camera just moves away, so we don't have to look at it.
Mm-hmm. And was it Joe Wright did it in Atonement?
Yes.
With the beautiful Dunkirk shot.
Yeah.
Oh. That's a hell of a movie.
It is. It is. But the visual layers of this film are unbelievable.
Mm-hmm.
Because he is the master of his canvas.
Mm-hmm.
And absolutely tells a story visually and points to all of these things. And there's one shot at the beginning of the film that I thought was interesting, is that we move to, he has these insert shots where he looks at just stuff. as they're having the annual ball, is it the I can't remember the family's name, but the ones that have the annual ball after the opera,
The Lefferts
the Lefferts, and we focus in on
having a
food.
nude displayed.
Yeah, we focus. Yeah, we focus in on all those pictures
Yeah.
and insert shots of the food
Mhm.
and the gloves and
Mhm.
all of that stuff. And what's interesting is it all means nothing. The gloves are empty. There's a symbol right there. The gloves are
Right.
empty.
Right. And they're all. He's making the argument that, you know, the good argument. that none of this, everything is just empty pageantry.
Hmm.
And everyone there knows it, and everyone there thinks it's stupid, but everyone there continues to do it because they don't want to be the ones that get left out.
And they're all the ones under that. They're under that system, in which if you point it out, you're going to be, you know, working in a smelly factory for making pennies.
Right.
The shot that gets me is this. There's a shot of a I think it's a tea service, and the camera moves upwards to the corner of a room, and you see all these pictures on the wall,
Mm-hmm.
and the pictures are half an inch apart.
Mm-hmm.
They're just crowded into this corner. They're all just, everything is decorated within an inch of its life.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking it's representative because there's no room to move.
Right.
There's no room for anything. And it's remarkable.
Mm-hmm.
And that's really before we get into the characters.
Right. Right.
The character that Daniel Day-Lewis, boy, is there a better actor? I mean, do we have a better actor right now? Who I was surprised. Now, this movie is, what, 25 years old? A little over 25 years old?
7, yeah.
Were you surprised how young he was? Because I hadn't seen this in a while.
No, but only because I have recently seen the poster for In the Name of the Father.
Yeah.
The cover for In the Name of the Father. So I've recently seen that, so it didn't throw me off.
Which is the Daniel Day-Lewis movie they chose over this.
Yes.
It's a good movie, but it ain't the Age of Innocence.
No.
But when I'm thinking of Daniel Day-Lewis, I'm thinking Phantom Thread. I'm thinking the older, I'm thinking Lincoln. I was really surprised because he was so much younger at this point.
What's it? There Will Be Blood.
There Will Be Blood, yeah. Where we're used to the older Daniel Day-Lewis.
Yeah.
But he plays Newland Archer. I love that name.
Mm-hmm.
The Archer in a New Land.
Yeah.
Who is part of this society and follows its rules. But in every muscle of his face, you can see that there's something. He feels the weight of that repression.
Right. He doesn't. He continues it. It feels like specifically because he is the breadwinner for his family, his mother and his, I think, sister.
Right.
So he does. He's still there for them. If they spontaneously died during all of this,
He's screwed.
I was going to say he would immediately go to Madame Olenska. and
Yeah.
They would run off because the
They are all the weights around his ankles.
Yeah, and Winona Ryder's character most of all,
Mm-hmm.
because what's her name?
May Welland.
May Welland. She is far more cunning and aware than
Mhm.
anybody gives her credit for. Specifically Newland.
But at the same time, now this takes place over several years.
Mhm.
When we meet her, she is the picture of the flower of womanhood that is perceived by this society.
Mhm.
Dressed in flouncy, floofy, virginal white.
Mhm.
There's a beautiful shot at the opera where he is looking up at their box.
Mhm.
May is on one side and Ellen is on the other.
Mhm.
And they are contrasted because she is wearing the virginal white, Ellen is wearing the lace and the felt and all of and is dressed in red.
Mhm.
May is a product of this society, but she understands why she has to be a product of this society. She's not stupid.
No.
She's just not as interesting and not as exciting and not as worldly learned as Ellen is. And that is what draws him to her. That is what
Right.
draws him to Ellen.
And even when they were younger, he used to play with Ellen, apparently. And
Right.
he loved her then.
Mm.
And I guess he forgot about it.
Did you get the feeling, though, that May is settled in on the social rules
Mhm.
more, and I won't say comfortable with it, but but it understands the need to be so socially rigid more than Newland is.
I think that is because they are from slightly different levels of society,
Mm.
different money levels. May is a higher part because she's related to
Yeah.
Mingott, Mrs. Mingott, right?
Is that the Dowager?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, and who lives all the way up in North Central Park,
Right.
away from everybody else. Which is
She's the
where they
Godfather.
would, right. She is.
It's Professor Sprout, by the way.
Yes, it is. I was actually thinking the Godfather, the head of it all,
Mm.
was those two that they go to as like a court of appeals.
Yeah.
He said, well, they stand above all of this. What they rule is what everybody goes with.
I saw them as kind of the head of the five families.
Mm-hmm.
I saw the Dowager as being the Godfather, in that she manipulates. She doesn't order outright,
Right.
but she is literally pulling the strings.
Right. And I love her so
I do
much.
too. She's great.
But,
Sitting
I
in
love
her chair, we're sitting in her chair, always decked in these frocks and furs, and always with her dogs.
always
And
with her dogs, yeah.
it's like the Godfather with his cat.
Mm-hmm.
You know, always with her dogs, and always saying things to people that it's not ordering to do something. It's the drop in the bucket.
Right. It's
suggesting. It's a very feminine thing.
Mm-hmm.
Men don't do this quite as much, but she drops something and just lets it kind of lets the ripples go out. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you, but
Sorry. Yeah,
sorry, go ahead.
I think she's related to Mrs. Mingott. Mrs. Mingott is up so high.
Mm-hmm.
She's the Godfather,
Right.
Godmother.
Mm-hmm.
Newland is a lawyer.
Yeah.
Probably the son of a lawyer who
Yeah.
worked himself to death.
Family business.
Right. Well, he's like a junior partner in some firm or something.
Yeah.
It's a posh place, but it's
Code word
not
for boring.
yeah, rich.
Yeah.
It's rich. But he's not of the wealth level that I think May is. And May, because of her proximity to Mrs. Minga, who was her grandmother,
Hmm.
so she's in the royal family
Right.
and Newland is not.
Right. But he's been arranged to marry this woman. Well, maybe not arranged, but encouraged strongly to marry this woman. And she's a person, and this comes through his eyes. She's a person who says exactly what she is supposed to say
Mm-hmm.
at all times.
Every time.
He goes to the opera, and he meets Ellen, who, and I said this at the time, when the Academy Award nominations came around, Michelle Pfeiffer got robbed.
Yeah. Yeah, she did.
This is her best performance.
Best performance, hands down.
Because she's in this movie even when she's not on screen.
Oh yeah. She's a presence all the way through this.
She is.
She has a presence in this that she has never. No writer or director has ever put her in a role where she is this powerful.
Right. Although I do have to note that there is a scene in this movie where she is being led by the arm by Michael Gough.
Yes.
Alfred and Catwoman.
Mm-hmm.
I had to note that. Anyway.
A year after she was.
Year after. Mm-hmm. I had to note that. Anyway. But yeah, she's never been this powerful.
No, and she can carry. She's a much better actress than people ever gave her credit for.
It's the Leonardo DiCaprio.
Right, she was
syndrome.
pretty, so they just we'll put her into pretty girl roles.
She's gorgeous, and so they think, well, she can't really act. I mean, she's just,
but she can.
She can.
She deserves. I wish she had been in Casino instead of Sharon Stone.
Absolutely, 100%.
She would have killed that role, and it would have probably made the movie much better.
A movie I liked that I predicted she would win the Oscar for, and she didn't, was The Fabulous Baker Boys.
Oh yeah.
She was very good in that.
That's Linklater, isn't it?
Yeah. Unfortunately, no, I don't think it is. Unfortunately, she got an Oscar nomination the year before for one of her worst performances, and that was in Love Field, which she put on a southern accent, and it takes place during the weekend of the Kennedy assassination, and it's just not very good. Yeah, it's not her best performance, and I don't know why she was nominated for that, but this, when we first meet her, the character is so rich rich in texture. I don't mean in money, but in texture, in the fact that this is a woman who was part of this society.
Mm-hmm.
She married a Polish count.
Right, and so she's been in Europe all these years.
In that bohemian society.
Right, living in a completely different set of circumstances where, yes, she was rich, but she got to hang out with interesting people, and it wasn't this strict, rigid society.
She's
basically
worldly.
The European upper class actually knows how to have a good time.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Often too much of a good time.
Right.
Whereas American upper class really only seek to impose their will on everybody they meet. It
speaks of our puritanical priorities.
Never trust a rich man's son.
Right. This movie is is that in spades.
Yeah.
I mean, absolutely. This is, and we've been dealing with this since the very beginning, when our forefathers came over here, and puritanical, rigid, wanting things to be a particular way.
Right.
And
they're
Europeans,
British.
Europeans have always been seen as a little more open, a little freer. Even our movies are like that.
Continental Europeans have a much more open idea to sex and
Well,
are open to actually being human.
Yeah, yeah.
Whereas the English and our basis were the exact opposite. What this country, the United States, was founded, to quote Robin Williams, by a group of people so uptight that the British kicked them out.
That says something.
Hello, we bring you guilt, syphilis, and alcohol.
Well, it also, at the same time, you get the feeling from her. She's got this smile on her face. It's this sort of wry grin that's, she's been around. I have a suspicion that she's probably had a lot of affairs, when affairs were probably at the time acceptable.
In Europe,
especially. Yeah.
I mean,
she follows her passions, and in America you couldn't do that.
Yeah.
But she, something about her in that freedom grabs at him.
Mm-hmm.
Now, let me say this. Newland Archer is the walking representation of the old song, if you can't be with the one you love, love the one you're with.
Yeah.
He is the walking representation of that.
Stephen Stills probably could have based his song
on Newland Archer.
On Newland Archer.
But she was abused by this count. And she got away from him and came back to America. And really and truly, and you get it from that first scene in the opera, she's trying to recapture something that she had before, this nostalgia that she had for this society when she was younger.
And she begins to realize how tough and rigid and structured it is, and what they expect of you, whether you know what to do in that situation or not.
Yeah, because they're going to have a gathering. They're going to have a gathering, and they start getting all these notes. Regret to inform. Sorry, cannot make it. This is. All of these different things, all these rejection letters that people don't want to come, because Madame Olenska is not the proper person for them to hang around with or to socialize with.
Right.
And largely because she's in the middle of a divorce from the Count.
Well, is proposing a possible divorce.
Yeah. And you just didn't do that.
Right.
Because at the time, marriages were not for love. They were, marriages for love were basically a 20th century construct.
The van der Luydens.
The van der Luydens.
Henry van der Luyden are the ones that stand atop. They're the arbiters.
Mm-hmm.
And it's Michael Gough.
Yeah. It's Alfred.
Yes.
Do we ever meet the Count? We don't ever meet the Count, do we?
No. They talk about him being in the U.S. near the end.
Okay, but we never see him.
Right, but we never actually witness him, as far as I know.
But Newland, and it's almost comical, because they sit down together afterwards, and they're talking, and she plucks a heartstring, because there is something in his, there is something about her that is spirited, that is worldly wise, that is funny, that is it's upfront.
Mm-hmm.
It's not this rigid, pole at the back, I have to act this way.
Mm-hmm.
She breaks social customs right there at that party by leaving the company of one man
To go to another.
to another.
Yeah. And that's even said by Joanne Woodward's narration.
Right. Which is wonderful, by the way.
You know what? Most of the time when there's narration, I have a real problem because I'm like, well, who are they talking to? Especially if it's a character and they turn to the camera and narrate.
Mm.
But I'm like, why are they talking to us? Do they know they're in a movie?
Right.
Or why is this voice over here? Who are they talking to?
Well,
but here, it feels like she's spinning this story, and she's telling it, and then it fades into them actually doing their things. She's like sitting in the room reading the book to us.
Yeah. Or we're at the party.
Right.
And she's sitting next to us, and she's whispering to us, who that person is, or who these people are, or what their story is.
Right. Maybe she's a columnist that's training a new columnist to come in, and just a new society person.
That narration is brilliant.
Yeah.
Because it's a brilliant device. Because it orients us. Mm-hmm. I tried to imagine the film without it.
It would be like
I think without it,
it would be like trying to watch The Magnificent Ambersons without Orson Welles' narration, which is similarly brilliant for that picture.
It gives us an orientation, and it also cuts down on a lot of time.
Right. It exposits without being expository.
Yeah. Now, it should also be said that this movie came out at a time when this kind of film was commonplace.
Yes.
Because there were a lot of these
Pride
BBC...
and Prejudice and Emma and...
Yeah. This was, I think, at the time or right before or right after when that big Jane Austen thing happened.
Yeah.
This was right... was this around the time of the Pride and Prejudice, the one with Colin Firth?
I
can't remember.
So. I think so. Early, and the Emma Thompson's Sense and Sensibility.
Yeah.
Like
and this was a year after Howard's End.
Mm-hmm.
Which, boy, we're going to have to talk about that, because that movie's incredible.
Yes.
That's just as good as The Age of Innocence.
And The Remains of the Day.
And The Remains of the Day. God, The Remains of the Day is so sad.
Yes.
I mean, this movie's not exactly cartwheels, but Remains of the Day is so sad.
That is a very depressing movie.
They're both about compromise.
Yeah.
And they're both about people who have to stay in this rigid thing. Now,
people who are expected to stay in their lanes and actually do.
The difference is that Newland Archer doesn't want to.
Right.
Stevens, the butler in that film, did so because he chose to.
Mm-hmm.
But the thing is, with this movie is, it almost becomes comical because when he meets the Countess and she grabs hold of something inside of him, he does everything he can. He goes to May and he implores her to move up the engagement.
Right, because he reasons that if he's married, he won't be tempted.
Right.
I guess, or so, which, especially in that society, means nothing.
And it should also be noted, and this is a thing. This is in a production like this is not something I expected. Between the Countess and Newland, they want each other.
Oh, very much so.
Badly.
Yeah.
I mean, when they're sitting in that carriage and they're looking at each other, I'm thinking, if this were the 1920s, they'd be going at it.
Mm-hmm.
If this were a few years in the future, I mean, there's some heat there.
Mm-hmm.
And Uh, but there's this thing between them.
Right. There is a wall of decorum between
Well,
them, and
she says later in the film, it's one of the best scenes in the film when she's sitting there, sitting in that carriage. He's ready to go.
mm-hmm,
He's ready to have an affair with her.
mm-hmm,
And this is where I got the idea that she's been around in other affairs, because she says something about it's a world of shadows and secrets,
mm-hmm.
and you don't want that.
Yeah.
You don't want to live like that. I have a feeling that's largely what broke her away from the Count.
Well, I think he was.
Well,
they were.
and
very
he was abusive
open,
too.
Yeah, they were very open with their marriage.
And I have a feeling it was like he could run around and screw around and do whatever he wanted to, but when she did it, his toxic masculinity kind of, he was like, well, I can't have that.
Right. It was smiles on a summer night.
Right.
Yeah.
And he check out our episode on that. But she knows better.
Mm-hmm.
I also sense that she's a little older too. Maybe a little older, and definitely more worldly wise.
I think she's about the same age as Newland. She might actually be a little younger, but she is very much older in terms of wisdom.
Yeah.
And
she's been around.
Right. She understands the world in ways that he never could, even with all of his books. He got monthly shipment of books. This always stands out to me. He said that my monthly shipment of books didn't even bring me joy. There were 4 full crates.
This is before television. This is before movies.
Before radio. Before pretty much almost before recording.
Mm-hmm.
So records and all that. None of that's there. But I mean, man.
I know
there's nothing else to do, but damn.
Well, and he wasn't married. He wasn't married, and he wasn't,
He was at that point, I think.
Well,
anyway.
I remember Chuck Jones said something. He said in the years before television, when you lived in a house, you had a lot of books, and you had so many books that you couldn't, when you moved, you couldn't take them with you, so you just left them there. You had a mountain of books.
Yeah.
And you just left them. Because, you had no room for them, and you couldn't reasonably take them all with you.
And you're just going to get more anyway.
And you're just going to get more anyway. But 4 crates
a month?
Of books a month? Damn. Yeah.
And you have to, these were not small crates, so he's probably getting 200 books a month if I'm being very generous and only saying 50 will fit in one of those crates.
Right.
That's a lot of books.
That's a lot of books. And again, stuff. The stuff that they have, the things, the objects, all of these things that are around. I think it culminates. We talked about, the gloves and the dishes and the things. It culminates in this beautiful moment when May and Ellen and Newland visit a museum, and they see an object, and the thing says "use unknown."
Mm-hmm.
It culminates there because it's like nobody is going to know in 20 years what all this crap was for.
Right, and the way that society, that kind of structure was dying by the 1870s.
Yeah.
And they knew it.
Yeah.
And they fought hard to keep it.
Hmm.
And they kept up the illusion of it for many years after, probably almost into the 40s, until the Depression, maybe.
It really started to break in the 20s.
Yeah. Because people were finally saying, hey, I don't want to behave like this, so I'm not gonna.
Hmm.
And they can deal with that however they choose. People started being more independent.
Hmm.
And moving away from a rigid, structured society. That is the point that probably most Republicans will say the country started going wrong. Looser
Again,
values,
I say,
morals.
what the hell do you want?
Looser morals, or however they want to put it.
Nobody gets the world they want.
No.
And it's interesting because I say probably around the 1920s, the jazz era.
Yeah.
When the social structure started to change in ways that the older generation was not comfortable with.
Just look at Downton Abbey.
Yeah, look at Downton
Very
Abbey.
similar, yeah.
Women were voting,
Mm-hmm.
which 100 years,
Mm-hmm.
1920,
Yep.
100 years. Jazz came along. Women wore more makeup.
Less
The
clothing.
skirts got shorter,
And less layered.
less layered, more open.
Flapper dresses and
Yes. And the movies happened
yeah.
at the time. And the movies began to represent a larger society, a society of conservatives who wanted society to be this way.
Mm-hmm.
In the sense that whenever you had a woman who was loose,
Mm-hmm.
who wore short dresses, who listened to jazz music, who didn't conform to what was expected of her, usually at the end of the movie, ended up dead or on the street.
Right.
Ended up working street, I should say.
Yeah.
And it was always it was because Hollywood at the time was run by old white men who
At the time.
at the time. And if it's
At
in
this
Hollywood,
time too.
Yeah.
At this time too.
but I mean even more rigid.
Except there's old white women too.
Yeah.
Occasionally.
And being an actor
Mm-hmm.
in the early part of the century was tantamount to being a prostitute.
Yeah.
It was not a reputable
Mm-mm.
profession. And the movies from the 20s and 30s and the early 30s were very raunchy
Yes.
for their time.
Yes. Or
Until-
they could be.
Until the keepers of good taste, the keepers of good taste flocked in and decided to change it.
Right. Quote unquote good taste.
Good taste, yeah. I'm offended by this, so I'm sure everyone else is offended by it too. Will
I don't
Hayes
like this, so no one does.
Will Hayes and Joe Breen and these people got together and just decided that the movies needed to clean themselves up.
Right.
Which, if you've seen the movies they made, they weren't rocket scientists. A lot of the content got out, but
Yeah.
this social structure of this movie is so.
When we talk about it being like a mob movie, it's exactly that. When you watch a Scorsese mob movie, it always breaks down into how you should act, how you should be, what you should do, and how you can get ahead.
Right.
And that's what this is. It teaches. It's teaching you. This is where you go. This is how you have to behave in these circumstances. And if you don't, ruin.
And you teach a woman how to be a lady by teaching her that the hands go this way, the face goes this way, you smile at this point, you don't smile at that point, you turn this way, you turn that way. It's got to be exhausting.
Oh yeah.
What must sex eventually be like? Because by the time these girls get married, most of them are virgins and have no idea
Yeah.
about it. They're not educated in that area. What must it have been like? You've probably never seen a naked man. So it must be terrifying.
Yeah.
And your only expectation...
Or hilarious.
Yeah.
This is what we do.
Your only expectation when it comes to sex is to consummate and to create and to procreate. And that's it. Any noble...
It teaches them how to be okay with being property and an object that's just there for his pleasure, really.
And you don't have an individuality.
No.
Now, I said that... now, we said that Winona Ryder was the only Oscar nominee. I would offer this up. I think she gives the best performance in this movie because Michelle Pfeiffer can be open and can be expressive and can be... Winona Ryder cannot.
Right.
Her character cannot.
She has to convey every single emotion that she wants to convey through the blankest expression, because it has to be a blank expression.
Right.
That's what's expected. But she is then communicating. There was something that she said, this, and this, but then I wouldn't know about that.
Yeah.
And it's like, damn.
Mm-hmm.
Granny Mingot taught you well.
Mm-hmm. In a few years, she will be Granny Mingot.
Yeah, yeah.
I have a feeling Granny Mingot has been through this.
Mm-hmm.
There's a moment when she effectively tells Newland that she knows what's going on.
Mm-hmm.
In not so many words.
Oh, in none of those words.
And that is the moment when you realize this girl is smarter than she's letting on.
Oh, yeah.
I'm going to tell you something. When I was sitting in when I saw this the first time, and there's a moment when he is really on the tipping point of breaking off the engagement. Mm-hmm. He is absolutely there. And that's the moment when she tells him that she's pregnant.
Yep.
I knew it was coming.
Well, yeah, and she knew weeks before.
Yeah.
She was holding it.
The way she stands up, the way she looks at him, you know it's coming.
Mm-hmm.
And it breaks your heart.
Mm-hmm.
Because you think he is now chained to all of this.
Yeah.
He can't get away from it. It is a life of compromise.
Mm-hmm.
But moving to the end of the movie, she dies.
Yeah. Young.
And we meet him at age 57. I'm not sure exactly when the movie ends. It's sometime in the early part of the 20th century, I think, because there are motor cars.
Well, if this is in, let's say this happened in 1870.
Yeah.
And
he's 57.
He was already what, in his mid-20s?
He's 57 when we meet him at the end.
I know,
of the
but
movie.
in the.
I'm going to say sometime in his mid-30s. I would say maybe his early 30s.
I would say he's probably a little bit younger than that, because they usually tried to get him married when they were younger.
Well, women, but I mean, men could be a little.
Oh, true, but it feels like he's maybe in his late 20s, early 30s,
Mm.
and this is 27 years later, so it's probably like 1905.
They've got motor cars.
Yeah, this is probably about 1905, I would guess.
There's this interesting flood of information that comes about in like the last 10 minutes of the movie.
Mm-hmm.
Because he's there with his son, played by Robert Sean Leonard. And it's like this reveal that May knew
Right.
what was going on.
Mm-hmm.
And was it the Countess was in town, or the Countess lived there, or they're in Paris?
Yes, they're in Paris, and the son has been in contact with her, and he's saying, okay, well we'll go see her,
Mm.
and that's when he basically says to his father, "Oh yeah, Mom told us about how much you loved her and everything, and how you stuck around for us," and he's like, and then he's like, "Hey, come on up." And he goes, "I'm right behind you." Which, like an action movie, means that he's not.
Yeah.
Except he just doesn't die at the end. Like, if anybody says that in any kind of action movie, sci-fi,
Mm-hmm.
any action movie, they're dead. Because they are not right behind you. They are
I was-
sacrificing themselves.
Really, really admiring the last 2 or 3 minutes of this movie, because he doesn't go up there with him.
Right.
He looks at her window, and the window closes. And Scorsese's camera stays on Newland for an unusual amount of time.
Yeah.
And then he gets up and he walks across the street.
Yeah.
And it lingers till he's out of sight.
Mm-hmm.
It's an amazing, emotional, beautiful moment. I can tell you this. I think in a way everybody has been in this place
Yeah.
that he's in this sort of way. You meet someone, you either have a relationship with them or you don't, but something in that person grabs hold of you,
Yeah.
and it stays with you forever after.
Mm-hmm.
There's always a private passion that you have locked away in your heart. Like Rick in Casablanca, that private thing that you've locked away in your heart. And it's just, it's something about it has grabbed hold of you.
Yeah. We'll always have Paris.
We'll always have Paris. And to anyone else, it makes no sense.
Right.
But to you, it makes perfect sense. That's a very human emotion. That's a very human thing. Why that person snagged you in just the right way is, it's a mystery.
Mm-hmm.
Because you'll meet 10 million people in your life, but
Right.
I know, because I've been through this.
Well, it's like, what is it, in Citizen Kane?
Mhm.
And he says he sees the girl on the ferry.
Yeah. Mr. Bernstein, yeah.
Yeah.
I only saw her for a second, but I bet you not a month has gone by I haven't thought about her.
Mm-hmm.
And whether you have a relationship with that person or not.
Right.
I've been through this.
Mhm.
And for whatever reason, because life is not convenient,
No.
you were not able to be with that person.
Mm-hmm.
But they stayed on your mind. That essentially is what this movie is.
Mm-hmm.
Something about her has grabbed him. And through the cosmic circumstances of all around him, he cannot be with her.
Right.
But it's not for lack of trying.
No. How about that kiss? Whew.
Wow. Yeah.
That could have melted the middle of Antarctica.
I'm telling you. Man, oh man. Because it is
Jeez.
a kiss long delayed. And it's... there's a reason I picked this for Valentine's Day.
Yeah, I mean, that is the definition of smolder.
Yeah.
And the
Because-
way
and
that
it's
he just
earned.
kind of falls on her, and he's just holding her head
And it's-
in her lap, and she's
Mhm.
hunched over him, and
Mhm.
that is the most contact they will ever have with each other physically.
Somebody could have painted that and put it in a museum,
Yeah,
that image.
the way that Scorsese frames that is just
Way
heartbreaking and beautiful, and
You could take almost any image from this movie and just put it on a wall.
right.
I mean, this is a gorgeous movie.
Oh yeah, this is, as much as thematically and story-wise, it's his Magnificent Ambersons. Visually, it's his Barry Lyndon.
And of all of those films that came out in the 90s that dealt with this society and, you know, these period pieces that came out in the 90s that were so prevalent, this, to me, is the best.
Yeah.
And I've seen a lot of great ones.
Mm-hmm.
I've seen a lot of great ones. This is the Merchant Ivory movie that Merchant Ivory never made.
Yes.
I'm so glad that he broke away from his usual tapestry to make this.
Yeah.
Because this is the movie he made after Cape Fear.
Yeah. Which is
And-
kind of a beautiful statement, because both of them are about as terrifying.
Yeah.
In very, very, very different ways.
And it's the movie he made right before Casino.
Mm-hmm.
And I like when a film artist breaks away from their comfort zones.
Right.
He's not off the terrain,
Right.
but he's broken away from he's broken away from the usual approach to his material.
And Scorsese does this a lot.
Mhm.
He started doing it a lot more after this.
Yeah.
But, I mean, even Raging Bull and After Hours and Last Temptation of Christ are not what you would think would be in his wheelhouse.
Well, I'm going to say that I think that he, when he came out with Casino, I think largely he realized that he had reached the end of that kind of film.
Mm-hmm.
Because The Irishman is a much different film.
Very, very, very different. And so
The-
is The Departed for what it is.
He started making, because the Departed is a different terrain altogether.
Mm-hmm.
And he started trying other things. That's when he made The Aviator.
Yeah.
Gangs of New York, a little bit in the same terrain, but not exactly.
It's
Gangs
the
of
same
New York-
terrain, just older.
Gangs of New York is a good movie,
Gangs of New York is a great movie.
but and I think you like it a little more than I did, because
I think so.
as much as I love it, I'm not as engaged with it as I am with a lot of his other films. It's a big
I would
epic.
recommend seeing it again.
Yeah.
The more times you see it, the more it reveals Gangs of New York.
My favorite scene in that movie is the scene where John C. Reilly shows his influence.
when he puts the watch up.
He puts the watch on the
Yeah.
thing,
Uh-huh.
and they come back, and it's still there.
Mm-hmm.
That's a great moment. I love that. I love stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
We're going to do something. You know, we started to do this a little bit, I believe, when we talked about Mean Streets. We're going to continue down his filmography a little bit, because we stopped at The Last Waltz. And hang on a second.
Well, later this year, because Goodfellas is turning 30, Goodfellas is on our slate this year.
Mm. Goodfellas came out the year I graduated from high school. Yay!
Oh, wow.
30 years. Okay, so hold on. Because we had some fun when we
Last
did
year
this.
was my 20-year anniversary.
Yeah. You're 10 years younger than me, so.
Yes. But, this is... Well, you're looking for whatever you're looking for. So
whatever you're doing, you're bullshit.
Whatever you're doing, you go ahead and do. I agree with you. I love it when filmmakers kind of break their stride. Like
Yeah.
When John Ford did a war movie.
Yeah.
Or when Billy Wilder does like sort of an action war picture, like five Graves to Cairo.
Yeah.
It was a good one. I really like that one. But yeah, Scorsese is really good at being able to just jump around because he has so many influences.
Yeah.
Beyond just what he saw on the street. He has a lot of Italian film influence and classical American, so he can jump. As you can see, he can go from Mean Streets to Alice Doesn't Live Here Anymore to Taxi Driver.
This man will talk about Italian cinema at the drop of a hat.
Yes, and the My Voyage to Italy documentary is really, really, really good.
Yeah. He, I recommend going through his films and really looking at the ones that you don't really know.
Yeah.
I mean, we've all seen Taxi Driver, we've all seen Goodfellas. Go and look at some of the other films. We stopped at The Last Waltz last time. Okay, so Raging Bull. We did an episode on this. Was it last year? Because we did a boxing month theme.
Yeah.
This is a better film than I think a lot of people give it credit for.
Raging Bull?
It's brutal.
I think it's his best film. It's my favorite of his.
But for an audience, is not really very engaging for the typical audience because the character is so unlikable.
Oh, yes.
And it's so difficult to get to.
Yeah.
And it's... I admire that.
Yeah.
And I admire that with the film he made after that, which is The King of Comedy, which a lot of people didn't like at the time.
Yeah, it's taken a long time for that to be as well regarded as it is, and it still ends up being overlooked when discussion of Scorsese comes up. Then there's After Hours.
There's After Hours. After Hours is... It does not feel like a Scorsese picture.
No.
It's a guy lost in New York
Griffin
over the
Dunn.
course... Griffin Dunn, lost in New York over the course of one night.
That is a... I've only seen that once.
It's a rare
I've
comedy.
always wanted to come back to it. It is insanity on ice.
It is the only time in the history of mankind you will ever see Martin Scorsese direct Cheech and Chong.
Yes.
The only time.
Although I would love to see them pop up in another movie later,
Yeah.
like now.
Yeah. You know what I would love for Scorsese to do is I would love for Scorsese to start doing a Hitchcock thing where he pops up in his own films. Like, in this one, he shows up as the photographer.
Mm-hmm.
And then I think he shows up again in Hugo as a film director.
Yeah, he's in Gangs of New York as a rich guy during the draft riots.
He's in a really disturbing scene in Taxi Driver.
Very, very, very disturbing scene that he wasn't supposed to be in, but the actor didn't show or something like that. Or they had to
Thought the
fire
actor
him or something.
died
Oh,
or
maybe.
something.
Something
But-
happened that he had to fill in last minute because they had to shoot. And
The funny thing is, Martin Scorsese was not blessed with a lot of height.
no.
Martin Scorsese's probably about 5'5", 5'6". He's probably about as tall as I am. So when he's sitting in the back seat, there's a production still of him sitting in the back seat. All you can see are his eyes because he's sitting so low. They had to put him on books to get him up there so you can see him. But let's see, what came after that? Oh God, The Color of Money. I do not like this movie.
I like it, but it is probably it's the lowest rated. I think this and Boxcar Bertha are the lowest rated that I have of his. This is I like it for what it is, but don't like it for what it wanted to be.
It's Martin Scorsese brought to you by GQ.
Yeah.
I mean, you got two of the best looking guys in the world. And it's a sequel to The Hustler. And for me, that's really where all the creativity really stopped.
Yeah.
It's standard filmmaking that I feel like anybody else could have done.
It feels like he took this. I think he took The Color of Money for a couple of reasons. First of all, he needed something to make money.
Yeah.
Because
The commercial hit.
Right. Raging Bull hadn't done well at the box office.
King of Comedy had
King
After
of
Hours
Comedy
didn't.
and After Hours flopped. He couldn't get Last Temptation of Christ off the ground. He couldn't get Goodfellas off the ground. He couldn't get all this stuff. So I think he took Color of Money. It's like, oh, Tom Cruise, he is the single most popular person in the world right now.
Mhm.
And Paul Newman,
Because Tom
I've
Cruise
always
was
wanted to
just
work
off.
with Paul Newman.
Tom Cruise was just off Top Gun.
Yeah, and why wouldn't he? And he probably loved The Hustler.
Yeah.
When he was a young man.
Which is a fantastic movie.
Oh, it's wonderful. And The Color of Money, I like how it develops Fast Eddie Felson.
Mhm.
And I like that we get to see him later in his life.
Catching up with characters years later, yeah.
You're right, but Martin Scorsese now could make The Color of Money then better. It
And the
needed a little bit more
Academy-
of an aged person to direct it.
The Academy was apologizing. He did not win an Oscar for his performance.
No.
He won an Oscar because he's Paul Newman.
Yeah. Well, he won an Oscar because they hadn't given him one before.
Yeah, it was an apology Oscar.
Right. It was.
He should
"Oh,
have
God,
won his-
We know you're really good. We're sorry. Here.
I could have held off and had him win his Oscar for Nobody's Fool.
Mm-hmm.
Because that is a much better...
Verdict.
The Verdict.
He probably should have won for The Verdict.
But that is his... The Verdict and Nobody's Fool, those are two of his best performances.
Oh, absolutely.
Um,
And Road to Perdition. He was
And Road to
nominated
Perdition.
for that too. He should
there's
have
a whole... I mean, he had a career of more than half a century.
Yeah.
Could have won his Oscar for HUD, which is a great
Great.
performance, because it's one of
Cool
those.
Hand Luke.
HUD is one of those movies where he's playing a complete jerk,
Yeah.
but you love the guy. I mean, you love the actor, but you're admiring him for taking a role that takes down his vanity.
Yeah.
But I'm telling you, The Color of Money could not be in more contrast than the film Scorsese made after it, which is The Last Temptation of Christ.
Mm-hmm.
which I think had to be, which I think had to be probably the most, if maybe the most personal film he ever made.
Mm-hmm.
We did an episode about that.
Yeah.
And I'm still not feeling like I got fulfilled. So we may redo that one in the future. It's the most humane treatment of the life of Jesus Christ that I've ever seen.
Yeah.
Maybe the only real humane treatment.
Yeah.
Pulling him off of a pedestal, pulling him off of the picture postcard.
Making him a person.
Making him a person. And for people like me, making you feel a little closer to him because you feel that he had the same flaws and fears that you do.
Yeah.
And yet, theaters were firebombed because people didn't like that idea.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I'm going to tell you something. I have seen Jesus Christ portrayed as a pimp.
Yep. Oh, Godspell.
That's offensive.
No. Jesus
Family
Christ.
Guy.
Family Guy, yeah.
That's more offensive to me. I mean, no. Just because it breaks away from your expectations.
Well,
and
it doesn't give you the...
It's not Cecil B. DeMille.
Right. It doesn't give you the Saturday matinee edition of Jesus. It actually asks hard questions.
Right. It challenges you.
And makes you think, was he a real person? Was he not? Did he really do what they said? Who cares? Because people made him into that anyway.
Yeah. Harry Dean Stanton at the end of the movie.
Yeah. It doesn't matter whether you died or not. I'm going to tell people that you did because people need something to grab onto.
Right.
People need hope.
Mm. It's a great moment.
Yeah.
And to my mind, me personally, it's my favorite Scorsese picture.
Last Temptation of Christ is really.
Because it challenges a lot of perceptions.
Challenges everything.
That are not...
and Christianity.
That are not just challenging your way of thinking. Mm-hmm. Because when you're a religious person, when you have those religious convictions, they're at the core of who you are. Which is why I think a lot of people got offended by it. Mm-hmm. And when it brings it down to a level that challenges how you think and how you perceive, it will either rattle you to the core, mm-hmm. or it will get you thinking. Mm-hmm. And that's what it did for me. Yeah. To my mind, for me personally, it's my favorite of his films. It's the one that I've broken apart the most. It's the one that I've analyzed the most. But then came Goodfellas. This is the one that people... This is the one that the masses absolutely grab onto.
Everybody knows him for.
Right.
More than even
Raging
Driver
Bull.
And Raging Bull and Mean Street. Well, Mean Street's has kind of fallen away, but the Goodfellas is... You say Scorsese, people say Goodfellas, and that's all they care to know. And you know what? That's okay if this is the only one that they know, because it's fucking amazing.
It is an amazing picture. I mean, any movie that opens with a guy bloodied and wrapped in a sheet in the back of somebody's trunk,
And the opening line.
Fuck is that?
Yeah, the fuck is that? And then the iconic is just freezes before they pull the trigger. All my life, I always wanted to be a gangster.
Yeah.
How is that not one of the most gripping first introductions to a character?
That movie is in fifth gear.
The whole way.
And most movies that are in fifth gear, Guy Ritchie, most movies that spend all of their time in fifth gear get exhausting.
Mm-hmm. Not this.
But he knows how to pull you around.
Right.
When you get it,
he knows when to make you think it's slowed down, but
Mhm.
it hasn't.
when you get into the end, then you get into the third act of that movie, and he is shooting the whole movie in a whole different style
Mm-hmm.
to represent his drug abuse.
Mm-hmm.
It's brilliant. You're thinking, okay, most third acts, and I am the guy on this show that complains about the ending of most movies.
Yeah.
You know, Lady Bird, Get Out, Moonlight. I'm the guy who's complained about the end of most movies don't work. This is the antidote to that. Because the third act of this movie is really brilliant.
Yeah.
And I would dare to say it's Pesci's movie.
Largely,
it really
yeah.
is. It's
I mean,
largely Pesci's
when you
movie.
think of Goodfellas, you think Martin Scorsese, lots of violence, and Joe Pesci saying, "Am I a clown? Do I amuse you?"
Mm-hmm. Even Animaniacs
Yep.
parodied that
With not just one thing, but an entire
series.
series of characters that they used in their shorts, called the Good Feathers.
The Good
And-
Feathers. There were pigeons in New York.
Yeah, who perched on the statue of Martin Scorsese.
And don't they crumble it at one point? It's like,
Yeah.
I think there's a statue of Coppola on the other side.
Yeah. And they kind of spoof. They do Goodfellas. They do The Godfather, because the God Pigeon.
When they're trying to get the donut out of the middle of the street, and the God Pigeon comes along, and he goes out in the street, and all the cars just stop.
Stop, and he gets it, and he comes back. The Animaniacs was just a brilliant show that is
Oh
getting
my
a
God.
new. It's coming back.
Which worries me.
No, with the original actors.
Oh, really? But is it
Yeah.
the original writers?
Yes,
Good. Good.
like Bruce Timm and all the ones that made Tiny Toons and Batman.
I
Wonderful.
admire a show that will be generally for kids, but is not aimed at kids, and it will throw stuff in there that kids would not know. Do you remember the sketch about In July? There is a sketch where Brain is recording a commercial, and it is quoting the famous thing that Orson Welles did.
Yeah, I do remember that.
And it's the In July.
Yeah.
You can't say In July, fellas. You're losing your heads. And he says, "Show me how you can use In July, and I'll go down on you." And in the Animaniacs version, "Show me a way you can use In July, and I'll eat cheese with you." I mean, my God, that's brilliant.
Yeah, it is.
And no child is going to know this. You know, but it's funny anyway.
Mm-hmm.
But The Age of Innocence is great.
Yes, it is. It's everything that you would think a Martin Scorsese film would be, with the exception of the absence of blood.
Yeah. There's no blood in this movie.
No.
There's not a violent.
Not
I think that kiss is about the closest thing to violence you get in this movie.
and it's violently passionate.
Yeah.
But, yeah, I think that wraps it up here.
Yeah.
For us. Next week, we start
We're going from
Black History Month in earnest.
rich society white people in New York to
Daughters of the Dust.
the Gullas. I saw this at Eberfest, which was a problem because there were no closed captions, and this movie has heavy, heavy accents.
Yeah.
That are very hard to understand. So I leaned over to my wife and I said, "We need to see this on DVD." And I'm glad you picked it for that reason.
Yeah, and it's streaming on Netflix.
Yeah.
Actually, I think it's at a few different places, but
now we're gonna go to a very happy, jaunty little film.
oh yeah.
It's called Moonlight. Excuse me, let me correct myself. Academy Award-winning film for Best Picture of the Year, Moonlight.
Yeah.
Go Academy.
Yay. And then we're gonna round it out with
A film they ignored.
a film that they ignored. I mean, I guess once you get this far into a series, it's Malcolm 10. So we're gonna.
Yeah, after the third
once-
one, it kind of.
You pretty much know where the series is going to go, but
Yeah,
it's
they just
still
start
a
being themselves.
magnificent. Malcolm X, Spike Lee's.
Absolutely full-blooded
Oh yeah, it's
biography.
It is a great film.
And the great arcing of a life.
Mm-hmm.
The idea of taking a man and stripping away all of his comfortable life, and then building him back up as this leader.
And never once deifying him.
Right.
He always shows that Malcolm X was a man. Malcolm X was a person first. And the way that he got thrust into the spotlight and then dicked around by the people who originally touted him and then sought to destroy him.
Mm-hmm.
I'm really looking forward to watching it again because I haven't seen it.
It's the movie that Gandhi should have been.
Yes, exactly. Exactly.
Dealing with him as a controversial figure.
Right.
Not just to white America, but within
right
the society that he was in as well.
Not sainting him.
No.
So that's where we are for this month. That about wraps it up here for us, I think. You can find all of our back episodes at the podbaydorspodcast.wordpress.com. You can find our episodes on iTunes and on YouTube. You can find us on Twitter at pod_bay, and then copy and paste that into Patreon. Find us over there, and at pod_bay, and kick a couple pennies into the kitty if you can. We would greatly appreciate it. We thank you so very much for listening, and the Pod Bay doors are now closed.
The mission has been completed.
If you're down and confused and you don't remember who you're talking to, concentration slip away because your baby is so far away. Well, there's a rose in the misted blood, and the eagle flies with the dove. And if you can't be with the one you love, honey, love the one you're with. 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 Don't be angry. Don't be sad. But don't sit crying over good times you had. But there's a girl right next to you, and she's just waiting for something to do. And there's a rose in the misted blood, and the eagle flies with the dove. And if you can't be with the one you love, honey, love the one you're with. Love the one you're with. Love the one you're with. the one you're with. Love the one you're with. Turn your heart right into joy. She's a girl and you're a boy. Get it together, make it nice. You ain't gonna need any more advice. And there's a rose in the fisted love, and the eagle flies with the dove. And if you can't be with the one you love, honey, love the one you're with. Love the one you're with. Love the one you're with.